Oak Ridge is a community unique in the annals of American history, especially unique in this current history of ours today. It's unique in that the town is all owned and operated by one person, and that is Uncle Sam.
Atomic City, U.S.A. At the invitation of the Atomic Energy Commission, CBS reporters Alan Jackson and Joe Wershba went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee with recording equipment for the first look-see for the press and public of the hitherto secret processes for making radioisotopes at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. They also wanted to find out how it felt to live in an atomic city, so before being welcomed by the manager of Oak Ridge operations, Mr. Richard Cook, they asked some questions.
How do you like Oak Ridge?
I like it very much.
Do you like living in Oak Ridge?
I think it's wonderful.
Is there much preoccupation among the people with the existence of the atomic bomb? Do you go around saying to yourself that atomic pile is just down the road there?
Well, you never think of it.
Mr. Harmon, it has been said before that here in Oak Ridge, the government decides how much profit you can make out of your business.
That is absolutely not true.
How about you, Miss Coffey? Have you found associations of these students interesting or difficult or what?
I think they're very interesting as far as the Yankees and the Southern people are concerned. I mean, then I had a fit when I thought, all the Yankees were tops and everything, and they're tops. They really got me, but after a while you just get used to it. I mean, they don't exactly have a brogue. They just get kind of in between, and I think we get along very well together.
Do you find that here in Oak Ridge, husbands and wives are more apt to get in an argument with each other than they would be elsewhere?
No, I think the average here is about the same as in other cities around this area.
In other words, the atom bomb neither helps nor hinders family relations.
I would say not.
Item 131 is the most used radioisotope today.
When the chips are down, as the situation is today, the function of the Atomic Energy Commission is primarily and almost overridingly a military function.
Tell me, Mr. Ormer, one question I'd like to ask everybody today. Why did you come to Oak Ridge?
I came to Oak Ridge because I like dealing with people, and I feel that Oak Ridge, being the center of the atomic energy program here, is most important to the world, and that the people here and their government presents a tremendous challenge, and I am proud to be a part of that program.
As a representative of the AEC, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Oak Ridge, to the first opening of the new radioisotope facilities to the press. As you recall, announcement was made last fall for the construction here of 2 new plant units for the production of uranium-235. These units will cost approximately a total of $227 million. Construction on one, K-29, is well underway, and the groundwork on the other, K-31, has already started. Other new facilities will also be constructed, and the existing facilities that are scheduled to remain as a permanent part of the laboratory will be rehabilitated. It is a pleasure now to introduce the General Superintendent in Oak Ridge for Carbide, who are responsible for the operation of the production facilities and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Mr. Clark Center.
I'm honored, ladies and gentlemen, to extend a welcome to you on behalf of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Carbide and Carbon Chemicals Division of Union Carbide and Carbon Corporation. I'd like to introduce Logan Emlett, who's in charge of operations at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
I thought it might be well to just review very briefly what the isotope program has been here at the laboratory. The number of shipments per month has increased tremendously. During January of 1950, we shipped more than 630 boxes. The quantity of activity that was contained in these boxes was very small. It amounted to about a 25th of 1/25th the weight of a dime. The weight that was paid for, shipping weight, was on the order of 35,000 pounds, so that the gross weight of materials that is being shipped from Oak Ridge is quite tremendous when you consider the rather infinitesimal amount of radioactive atoms which are present. The radioisotopes which we make here all start in the pile building. That is, at some time or other they are inserted into the nuclear reactor. From that point on, they move through the process until they end up in the packing and shipping room.
This is the pile, the most important area of the atomic project here in the Oak Ridge Reserve. Nothing spectacular about it. It resembles any big generation building that you might see at a power plant or perhaps out at the waterworks in your own hometown.
The pile proper is this stack of graphite, and in this graphite running in this direction that you are looking in are channels that go all the way through the graphite. In these channels we put rods of uranium equally spaced apart. When you have such a spacing of a sufficient amount of uranium in graphite, which serves as a moderator for fast neutrons, you will have a chain reaction taking place spontaneously. Now, this chain reaction, since it is spontaneous, all our work concerned here with controlling the pile is to limit the reaction. We do this by inserting neutron absorbers into the pile to absorb excess amounts of neutrons above that which we need to operate. These are boron steel rods going into the top of the pile. When you have fission taking place in uranium-235, you have radioactivity. I have a piece of uranium similar to the type that is used in the pile. You will notice here as I place this close to a Geiger counter that this is normally somewhat radioactive. You can hear the counter clicking faster as I move the sample closer to the counter. This is normal uranium. It is not the purified uranium-235. We do not use that in this pile. We use only the normal uranium. This uranium is a very heavy metal. It's the heaviest metal, heaviest element found in nature. You can tell by hefting it. This is a very small piece, and it weighs approximately a pound. This is a demonstration now of the activation of a dime in the neutron field of the pile. We do this by first bumming a dime from one of the spectators, taping it to a oak slat, and pushing the slat into a hole in the pile. With the help of your guide, I will insert now the dime into the pile and then bring it back to the Geiger counter. This slat that I have here is 12 feet long. I will push it approximately 7 feet into the pile shielding and into the edge of the matrix of the pile.
One small door is opened in a bank, resembling something like a safety deposit vault, and in goes a very narrow, long piece of wood with the dime on it. This piece of wood is about the same sort of thing you use to make a lattice. He pushes it in real fast and brings it out real fast. It was in there a fraction of a second, and now from here we can see the lights on the Geiger counter beginning to flash on, and the clicks are coming very fast. We've been watching the Geiger counter in operation now to this radioactive dime. The clicks you were hearing were the indication of the radioactivity. It's rather amazing how quickly it was made radioactive. The operator who used the board to push the dime into the pile did so as though he had hold of a hot frying pan. How long will that dime remain radioactive?
This particular dime will remain active only approximately 15 or 20 minutes to any great extent. If I had left the dime in for, say, 3 or 4 minutes, or maybe as long as a minute, the longer-lived activities would have been activated sufficiently so that it would have been active for several years.
What is the danger of the radioactivity emanating from this dime here?
Well, the only danger from it is the same as from any other radioactive substance, in that it would damage your blood cells or damage your skin.
You would call this activated dime the classic example of money that burns a hole in your pocket. Is that it?
That's absolutely true.
If that dime had touched somebody, there might be a danger of that person being, say, irradiated, getting certain X-rays in them, which wouldn't be any too valuable for them. Is that true?
That's correct.
Then you have the constant eternal problem here all the time when you're dealing with material much more explosive and dynamic and dangerous than dimes.
Much hotter, correct.
How do you do that? How do you know at any particular time whether somebody's getting hit?
Well, there are monitoring instruments in all the buildings, for one. Two, there are portable instruments which any man who is handling a material which is hot will check before he starts handling the material.
Now, as far as you know, there have been no cases here of anybody being permanently injured by radiation.
No, we've never had a case of anybody having a massive exposure or anything of that sort.
Most people come into the file expect to hear some violent noise like they do in a boiler house, but actually it's virtually soundless. People expect because nuclear fission has gone on behind this wall that they expect to hear a lot of noise. Actually, you don't hear a thing.
I expected to see a tremendous, gigantic plant. This stuff here that we've just come from, this uranium pile, is the basic element in the uranium atomic bomb, isn't it?
I'll say this, that what's going on inside the pile is essentially what goes on when a bomb explodes. You have fission going on.
Only here you have it under control.
Here it's under control. In a bomb, it's just let loose.
We have now moved on from the file building itself to what is called one of the cell units. Is that the correct name of it?
That's right, radioisotope separation building.
Well, what is the relationship of this building to the pile building which we just left?
We process the material that has been irradiated in the pile. We bring it down here and we make chemical separations from that into the individual elements.
What is your name, please, sir?
Gordon Hebert.
And what is your position here?
I'm a research chemist in the development of these processes for separating radioisotopes.
Well, now, how do you handle those isotopes after they have been separated? They're still radioactive.
They are still radioactive. In many cases, we handle them in bottles by taking them into shielded carriers, and we make our transfers by sucking them from one bottle into another bottle, also shielded.
You mean all of this goes on while the person doing it is completely shielded from the operation being performed?
That is true.
We're now in the building where all the shipping of isotopes takes place. It's been called by some enthusiastic publicity people the atomic pharmacist or the atomic drugstore. However, it does not resemble anything at all like a drugstore, and the first impression when you walk into this building is that you are in some sort of a locker room in a country club or perhaps a high school gymnasium. Now, these liquid isotopes, which have been made radioactive, are in small bottles under a heavy, thick lead shield and behind a thick concrete wall. Now, to get one of these bottles, the operator has to use an awful lot of Buck Rogers type of mechanism here. Rube Goldberg would probably enjoy seeing some of the inventions they have thought up to work on this material without having to touch it. For instance, you cannot see these bottles except by looking up to the ceiling, and in the background there is a large row of mirrors. Now, the mirrors reflect down on the top of the lead covers over these containers of bottles. Now let's see what happens when they begin to fill the order.
Next step is to remove this shipping container from the lead packing barricade out into the open where a lead top is quickly placed, after which all of the remaining operations may be done with complete safety. These operations are fairly routine, except for one. The outside of the box is tested for surface contamination and also for direct radiation through the sides of the box with special equipment. After this, the boxes are rolled along this conveyor section where they are weighed, labeled, and banded and sent up an inclined conveyor to the truck, which will quickly take them to the airport for air express shipment.
The peculiar thing about this business of atomic science is that radioactivity is kind of hard to keep track of. It's even harder to find in the first place. You can't feel the stuff. You can't hear it. You can't see it. And there's no way in which you can detect it except with special machines. And for this purpose, the Atomic Project has developed these special scientific machines just to tell what is radioactive and to what degree it is radioactive. One of the chemical engineers at the Atomic Project here at Oak Ridge is Mr. Ed Beauchamp. Mr. Beauchamp, would you tell us something about this isotope production and its use around the country? For instance, who can have an isotope, and how does he go about getting it?
Well, if I were interested in procuring an isotope to use, I would first make application to the Atomic Energy Commission.
In other words, then anybody who wants to purchase an isotope or a group of isotopes has to prove to the Atomic Energy Commission that he is going to put them to a useful purpose.
Undoubtedly, they have to prove to the Atomic Energy Commission's satisfaction that it will be of a useful purpose. As a matter of fact, requirements are that the people who use them submit reports on the progress they have made using radioisotopes.
Then what it comes down to that is this: a large part of this whole atomic project, this whole atomic research, is aimed at furthering the progress of not only military science, but agriculture, industry, and medical science.
It is so, and we hope that it will be continually more so.
Thank you very much.
Research Director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratories, Dr. Weinberg.
Dr. Weinberg, we've been hearing and reading an awful lot about the atomic energy program of today. When did it first become apparent that atomic energy as such was available to us?
The atomic energy existed, or more precisely, that nuclear energy existed, was known in the early part of the century. However, it was not until fairly recently, particularly about 1942, that it became perfectly clear that we could release atomic energy in a controlled manner.
But during the 1930s, weren't there a number of discoveries or studies made then which made it more positive that atomic energy was a possibility?
Yes, I think probably the most important of those discoveries was the discovery of uranium fission by Hahn and Strassmann in about 1939. These German chemists working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute found that uranium, when bombarded with neutrons, these are neutral particles of the same weight as hydrogen, these chemists found that when uranium was bombarded with such neutrons, it split into fragments, one of which was identified as barium. This was such a bizarre idea at the time that Hahn and Strassmann, in their original article, which was published in Naturwissenschaft in about 1939, stated the following. They said that as chemists, we must conclude that one of the products of the action of neutrons on uranium is barium. That as physicists, we find this impossible to believe. However, prior to the discovery of fission by these two German scientists, Enrico Fermi, working in Rome, had carried out a long series of experiments in which he bombarded practically every element in the periodic chart with neutrons.
Well, now, if right away, when this was a possibility, the use of atomic energy was pursued, what would have been the result then?
It's always very hard to make predictions on what might have been. I suppose it is fair to say that if fission had been discovered in 1935 instead of in 1939, then it is quite conceivable that the German scientists, who had a rather long record of collaboration with the military on the whole, would have pushed the matter to a logical conclusion much more quickly than the American scientists who had had little experience working with the military. The upshot could have been that the Germans, rather than the Americans and British, would have got atomic energy and presumably atomic bombs sooner than the Americans did.
Would you care to venture a guess as to the outcome of the last war, had that been the case?
I think anyone could guess as adequately as I on this.
But now, where do we go from here, Dr. Weinberg?
I think that it is inevitable that we will have nuclear reactors, that is, atomic energy power producers, eventually.
Let's put this another way here. If atomic energy is pursued to its fullest extent and can be used as the basic power of our country, of our cities, our industries and homes, can we then do away with coal mines and oil wells and gas wells?
I think the situation was well summarized in a New York Times article that appeared shortly after the first atomic bomb was dropped, which gave the story of this planet some several light years away from our solar system, which had a population whose power economy was based on uranium. And then, as a result of a long war and a huge research effort, it was finally discovered how to burn coal, and this was hailed as the greatest discovery of the last 6,000 years on this particular planet.
Because you didn't need all of the shielding afterwards.
Because you didn't need shielding, you didn't have radioactive problems, you had no temperature limitation.
All you had to do was dig the coal out and
burn it.
Match to it and burn it.
Yes.
One more question, Dr. Weinberg. A generation ago, a lot of our school students in the country were puzzling their heads and scratching their eyebrows over the problem of basic electricity, how it functioned. Do you think that a generation from now, they will be accepting atomic energy as students today accept electric current?
I think this is very likely. I think it probably will not take a whole generation for them to acquire the same familiarity with atomic energy that they now have with electricity. I might remind you of this New Yorker cartoon which appeared about a year ago around Christmas time, which showed this toy shop selling miniature cyclotrons, atomic energy, chemical sets, and radioactive Geiger counters for the kiddies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weinberg. Representing the government administration here for us today is Mr. Fred W. Ford. Mr. Ford, would you tell us exactly how is Oak Ridge governed as a city?
At this particular time, the Office of Community Affairs, of which I happen to be director, is in charge of all community operations. We do have a city council elected by the people who make recommendations to us, but in the last analysis, the AEC, who is responsible for all operations, must have the final say.
Mr. Ford, there's one question I want to ask everybody today, and that is, how do you like living here?
I love it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ford. Mr. Russell Field is the manager of commercial services in Oak Ridge. Mr. Field, with the government owning all of the land around here, how does a private businessman come in and set up a shop, a grocery store or a drugstore or something like that?
I can best answer that by saying that we do have a certain minimum requirement to assure continuity of operations.
But as the thing stands now, not just anybody can decide that he wants to set up a shoe shine parlor or a filling station in Oak Ridge and come in and do it.
That is right.
Is that in any way geared to his future profits? In other words, does the rent stay the same regardless of how much money he might ultimately make?
There is no limitation on the profit that the merchant makes in Oak Ridge.
What is life like in Oak Ridge for teenagers? Well, we asked two very good authorities on that to come along and tell us. Two teenagers. One is a senior in the Oak Ridge High School, Bob Helton, and the other is a junior, Jim Summers. Jim, how do you like life in Oak Ridge?
Well, I think it's probably one of the nicest places in Tennessee or the United States as far as that goes for the teenagers. You always have something to do, and it's just very interesting.
Well, tell me this now, fellas. What do you do for recreation around here? What do you do after supper?
Well, during the weekday nights, you generally have enough homework to keep you occupied. And if you don't have too much homework, you can go up to the Wildcat Den. And the Wildcat Den is the hangout now for teenagers, like probably the old corner drugstore used to be for the last generation.
Where did it get that name, Wildcat Den?
Well, Oak Ridge is known as Oak Ridge High School Wildcats, and therefore they named the Wildcat Den for the Wildcats.
Of these 900 students in the high school here, are they pretty evenly divided between boys and girls?
I think there are a few more girls than there are boys.
What do you think of the girls here? Are they, you like them better than those back in Kentucky?
Oh, yes, I'm a little bit older now. I like them quite a bit better.
Well, now, what about hunting and fishing? This seems to be a wonderful country for that sort of thing. You're right out here in the middle of the mountains, and without much traveling, you can be in a pretty wild country, can't you? Are you a fisherman?
Yes, I love to fish. That's probably my favorite hobby or sport. And if you're a bass fisherman, over here is Watts Bar Lake, about 35 or 40 miles. And then if you're a walleye fisherman over at Norris, big walleye caught out there.
Let's get on a serious subject here for a moment. What sort of a school do they provide you here? Is it a good school?
Oh, it's one of the best schools in the country. I think that will be shown by any of the leading educators. They can prove that. We have student government, and that's one of the main things we're proud of.
Thank you very much. Now let's take another look at the picture of Oak Ridge, this time from the medical standpoint. Dr. Raymond Johnson is one of the doctors who is practicing medicine in Oak Ridge. How long have you been here, Dr. Johnson?
I've been in Oak Ridge since 1944.
Well, now, you are undoubtedly familiar through your studies and your work with medical facilities and conditions elsewhere in the country. How do those facilities compare here in Oak Ridge with elsewhere?
I think Oak Ridge on the whole has one of the best equipped hospitals for a town of its size in the United States.
Shortly after the atomic energy story itself became known, they're circulated around the country, in fact, around the world, frequently some stories that working anywhere near an atomic project was bad for workers' health. Is that true now? What is the situation here at Oak Ridge?
I certainly don't agree that there is any danger here. I think our safety departments at the plants leave no stones unturned in furnishing protection for all of the people at the plants. And I think that there's absolutely no danger either to the workers or to we people who live in the city.
Well, now, Dr. Johnson, you've lived here since 1944. That's quite a spell in Oak Ridge. How do you like living here?
I like Oak Ridge. I think we have probably the best people in the world living here. The people are from all parts of the United States. They're most interesting to know, and I like Oak Ridge a great deal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan Jackson and Joe Wershba. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Atomic City, U.S.A. One of the most interesting and novel experiments in the world today. Uttermost outpost of science and a happy, progressive American small town. This recorded program has been a presentation of the CBS News and Special Events Department, produced by Tony Kraber. Of course, you wouldn't betray your country, yet many Americans do betray the principles of freedom and democracy when they preach or practice intolerance against a fellow American because of his race, color, or religious creed. Don't you betray democracy. Speak out always for better understanding. Remember, a united America benefits us all, so do your share to contribute to unity. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.